a model 1896 Swedish Mauser. Now let me give you the story here. I've wanted an '03 Springfield forever. And the problem with '03 Springfields where I live is that every time I see one in a gun shop, it looks like it's been kicked back from Europe the whole way, and they want top dollar for them. And it's just not in the cards right now, as much as I'd always poked around and liked and wanted them. And then there's this whole thing where they say, well, they had metallurgy issues, so you got to go with these serial numbers, like over 1 million or something. And then I'd see ones in decent shape that were less than 1 million, and ones that were over looked like crap. And then other people told me that's silly, it's all just nonsense, they were all fine. And it was always like this mystery with them. And then they'd hand them to me, and they were like different ones, like it's like an '03 Springfield is what it's called, right? And then they had different names, like different manufacturers made them. It's like kind of like the M1. My M1 is a Springfield, but I wouldn't have really cared if it was a Winchester or an H&R or whatever, because they are a mishmash of parts. It's really just the receiver itself that's Springfield. But there was always that thing, like there's ones that, what do they say, Smith Corona or something like that. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound familiar. What is that? Is that going to be as good? Is that going to be worth as much? Or it was just a lot going on. And this actually just removed me from that whole dilemma, because, doing some research and looking into them, I saw that it was really this rifle that, not necessarily this rifle, but this design, that they wanted to copy. And I can only imagine, these Swiss ones are really known for being like extra precision, extra well made. I can only imagine that, in the late 1890s or around 1900, that the Americans were sitting there with some of these going like, yeah, this is what we want. Forget about that whole crag thing. I don't know what we were thinking, but this is the direction we want to go, and it's kind of like a way of getting my version of an '03 Springfield cheaper, but then you're not really sacrificing on quality, because although I've never owned an '03 Springfield and certainly don't want to piss off any people that are into that, I can understand. I've had certain affinity for certain guns, and if somebody would talk about it disparagingly, I'd be like, that guy is an a-hole. So I don't want to go down that route. Much respect to the '03 Springfield, but I really think that these are known for being, let's say, like a much higher quality. When you talk about metallurgy, it's not like you're hearing rumors like, oh, well, you got to get these serial numbers because they had metallurgy issues here. The story with these is that the metal was actually so good, you know what I mean, that like, it was actually better than normal, so you're not hearing things like, well, there could be issues. You'd be like, with this, you'd hear, yeah, there's an issue with this metal, it's awesome, you know what I mean? Like the steel that they would use in these would be, special, that even when, and I don't know if this steel came from Germany and went to Switzerland, or I know that some of these were actually made in Germany. I think it was the other way around. I read something about it. I think the Swiss would actually send the steel to Germany and be like, here, make them out of this, you know what I mean, for us, before they actually started making them themselves. Well, anyway, enough of that disclaimer, as I don't feel like I really need to defend myself why I got this, because they are awesome, but I only wanted to add that anecdote that it's kind of like I don't really have to look for an '03 Springfield anymore, because this kind of fits the bill, along those lines. The '03 Springfield for me would have been interesting, really, because of being that I have an M1 Garand. I wouldn't have had to worry about another, yet another caliber. But then after learning about this round and actually looking at it, PPU sells this. This is a 6.5 by 55 Swedish. Not the 7.5 by 55 is called a Swiss, is the actual name for it. This one is 6.5 by 55 Swedish. It's not like it's impossible to find. I just put an order in for a bunch of boxes from Widener's at I think $15.75 a box of 20. So, you know, we're not talking about some hard to find $2.50 a shot kind of nonsense or whatever. It's cheaper than 3006 stuff that I find around now that the HXB has seemed to have disappeared. Unless you want to wait for a year for CMP to get their act together. So the round itself is actually, you know, an interesting one. And a Krag was always kind of like on the back burner that I want to, you know, I kind of was interested in it. I kind of like that whole door on the side deal, and it's just kind of interesting, and it fits in an interesting place in history, you know, for firing, you know, that age of firearms, how it's kind of like this one, the first step into modern age, modern centerfire stuff. And interestingly enough, I found that I could get a Krag, an original Norwegian Krag, that it's the same round. You know, from what I'm hearing, you got to be careful. Like, this thing will fire anything. Doesn't matter how hot it is, you know. But I heard that with the Krag, it's got that one lug bolt and everything like that. So if you buy a lot of the newer ammo, you could actually, you know, damage it. That you really want to just stick with that, like, kind of military load, you know, which I'm not sure how easy that is to find, because it looks like this PPU stuff might be a little on the hot side. You know what I mean? It's not exactly, you know, doesn't exactly seem like it's the same load as like the military surplus of this round. But still, on the back burner, I know I could still end up with a Krag. It's, you know, another thing where I don't feel like I'm just getting one gun with one round. If I really had my sights set on a Krag, I could get a Norwegian one and, you know, be able to play the dual role with this ammo, much like the Swiss and Norwegians did back in 1900 when they agreed on, you know, standardizing the cartridge for themselves, but did not agree on what weapons they were going to go with. And in my opinion, the Swiss definitely made the right move, because this thing is awesome. Let's take a little bit of a closer look here. Let me see if I can drag you in a little closer so we can really get a close-up look at just how precision made this thing is. It looks like your typical. By the way, this is a 1912 dated rifle. It looks like your typical, you know, Mauser action there, right? Like a lot like the K98, which I just recently did my video on. However, there are some main differences. It's definitely different in the respect that it does not cock on opening, as you see. It just kind of flops open, and it's the closing. See this action right here? That's the cocking action on closing, you know, a la Lee Enfield. You know what I mean? It's remarkably similar in that respect to an Enfield, but still has the control feed, you know, bolt here with the extractor that you know, you don't want to just throw around in there and just slam it home on it. Not too good. It's a controlled feed kind of action, and if you take a look at that extractor in there, it's definitely pretty interesting. It's the design is just, you know, slightly different than the K98, but still with these two big strong locking lugs. I gotta pull this bolt out for you to take a look at this. I mean, it's for this day, you know, to have. See, a lot like my video I did on the K98. These are the locking lugs up here, and look at the size of these. There's definitely no fooling around here. They did not want any issues, but no rear locking lug like you would see on the K98. This is all just hammer and trigger action back here. It's really just these two up front, but the difference between, like, you know, these two up front and other bolt action rifles of its day, like I said, the Krag, you got to kind of worry about what you put in there or what you fire, because it's only has that single locking lug, which isn't really that big. This closing, when the gaps that are inside here that grab the two lugs, it's so solid. I mean, I'm pretty sure you'd be able to fire any 6.5 by 55 load, like whatever some reloading manual shows as the sickest load you could put in there, this thing would be able to handle it. Some interesting things are, if you're like a numbers guy, you know, if you like to look at the numbers on your rifles, there aren't a crazy amount of stampings on this thing, like all over the place, like a Mosin. It just has like literally a library of things all over it to research. It looks almost alien with the amount of stamps on it. This thing, they are just really into serial numbering everything. These guys are crazy. I have never seen. What they do is they'll take like the last 3 numbers of the serial number, which on mine here is 940, right? There are so many 940s on this thing. They stamp it here. They stamp it on the back here. That's 2. On the safety is 3. On the bolt release is 4. On the bolt, 5. Bottom of the magazine plate, 6. On the receiver, 7. On the sight, 8. On the sliding thing on the sight, 9. On both rings, 10, 11. That's 11 just counting on the outside. I might have even missed one here somewhere. That's 11 just on the outside. Then when I took it apart, and we'll get to taking it apart later, when you take it apart, there's one on the stock on the inside. There's one on the handguard. And every little piece inside, even on the firing pin itself, that number, that 940 is stamped. It's insanity. It's insanity the amount of, you know, how they kept track of everything on one of these. So if you're into matching numbers, you know, God bless you finding a match of numbers one of these things, because any little part that had been changed would, you know, would throw that off. Meanwhile, on some guns, you know, you're like, yep, it matches here, it matches there, matching numbers. They're all 3 of them are the same. 3 of them. There's 3 of them on this gun. Just the hammer, the safety, and the bolt itself. Oh, that's the one I forgot. So on the hammer, the safety, the bolt, and the bolt removal, it's insane. You know, and if just one of those things, if just the safety knob had been replaced, or you know, or just the hammer, or even this metal plate on here, that would throw everything all off for you. You know what I mean? So, like I said, good luck on finding one matching numbers. My experience with this was that after purchase, like any other rifle, I'm like, okay, let me take it down here and you know, clean out all this cosmoline, clean it all out. This thing was a mess. It was filthy. And I'm the kind of guy, I'll take every screw and soak it and use a brush to get the grit out of the slot in the flathead screw. I mean, like when I put it back together, I want it to be like as much as like possible to make it like new. You know what I mean? Like clean. I don't do that like every time I clean a rifle, but upon first acquisition, I like to do that. You know, it kind of really makes you feel like you make it yours. You know. And tell you something right now. These things right here. This is retractable here. You squeeze it and this can go in, and then this is what makes this ring slide off. And there's also one up here, similar. You squeeze this in and it makes this ring come off the top. And then you would need to take both of those off to disassemble the whole rifle, right? After about maybe 4 hours, you know, you're going to get one of them off. Like figuring it out your way. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, because if I tell you to use a clamp and you crack the wood over here, you're going to, you know, want to kill me. You figure it out. I figured it out my way, and luckily did absolutely no damage, but it took a wooden dowel that I squeezed using a method, that's all I'm going to say, to hold this down while I took a hammer and actually had to bang this off, and this one, the same thing, gently and in a way to not make any marks or any damage. But I did it. And I'll tell you right now, going back on is easy. They just click right on. But I'll tell you something right now. When you do get them off after maybe 10 hours of wanting to kill someone, make sure that inside here, after cleaning, from, let's say, here to here, you cover everything with a nice coat of oil. You know what I mean? Not that stuff that's going to evaporate. Like, Ballistol is really good, but I notice if you put Ballistol a couple of days later, it kind of starts to dissipate. You know, so because it's mineral-based, I think it sort of evaporates a little. You definitely want to use, like, a petroleum-based oil here that stays, like, forever. You know what I mean? and I would coat it from here to here, and everything underneath here that's not exposed, because you are never, ever getting back in there again. Trust me, you're just not going to do it. So I knew I was never going to do that again, and I did the same exact thing and got in there and did that. But woo! I can only imagine like the Swiss, like some guys like, my rifle's broken, I need some help here. There must have been like a guy like this, and then another guy like, there must have been like 8 people involved in like getting these rings off, and then, high-fiving each other when they finally did it. Because they definitely did not want these things coming off by mistake. That is plainly obvious. Some interesting observations were that the cleaning rod, different than the K98, the cleaning rod runs full length all the way down to like somewhere around here, where there's like a block that it bolts into. So you have a full length cleaning rod on this puppy. You don't need a couple of friends to help you out to clean the barrel. I guess the Swiss were kind of like a little more you need to fend for yourself, and probably just had the steel laying around. But everything, even the quality, even of this cleaning rod, I gotta show you this. Like, even when you pull it out, it's like the whole way it's traveling in metal. I don't know if you could hear that, but even that sound of, listen, it's like everything is built so solid and so much like quality on these. It definitely blew my mind. Now, somebody went to town here on the front sight trying to drift it over and did a little bit of damage, but I noticed that they sell these in different heights, which is kind of cool. So that if you really did need to sight it in and, you didn't have enough metal on here, I guess you could always file it away, but if you needed this to be taller, you'd have a problem. But they sell these. I've seen them for sale. And what really bugged me out is, check this out. I looked down the barrel when I was going to get this one, and I was like, oh! It's counterboard, forget it, I'm not getting anything counterboard. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I looked at it from like this angle, and I'm like, counterboard? What the hell is this? And sure enough, it looked like it was threaded. And it is. And it's like this cap that comes off, and that's the barrel. The crown is fine. I'm looking at the crown, I'm like, oh, the crown is beautiful. What the hell is this? I couldn't figure this out. And then what I realized after doing some research is that not all of these had this. And there's some interesting doodads that you can get that screw on here. Apparently, for training purposes, they would actually they would have a device that screws on here, and it kind of clips over the sight hood.